back. WNST, Towson, Baltimore. And Baltimore Positive, we're positively into the summer, even though it's football season around here for at least a few more days. The Orioles are going to keep us active all week with the Toronto Blue Jays. Luke's going to be out of Camden Yards. I will be doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by our friends at the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with Window Nation, 866-90 Nation. You buy two, you get two free. 2 years, 0% financing. Still a great deal out there. We're enjoying our windows. I know Luke is enjoying his seat at Camden Yards and watching good baseball, as well as that in Owings Mills. Luke, it's been a year this week since I asked Lamar Jackson if he wanted to be a Raven for life, and then Chad Steele threw me out. I'll have some more reporting on that later on this summer because people have asked me, how did you get thrown out? I've investigated that. So we're going to be telling folks about that later on. But so it has been literally June 13th of last year was the last time I was in the facility. And I guess the air out of the tire in all of this over the last 6-7 weeks, where we spent 4 months talking about if this, then that, oh my God, what's going to happen? What are they going to do? Lamar. All of a sudden it is, Eric's had a great offseason. They've done all they needed to do. They fortified the wide receiver room. They look to be ready to roll. You show up out there with a true Super Bowl hopeful.
No question about it. I mean, and that's why you really had no other choice but to re-sign Lamar Jackson. I mean, that's really what the crux of the argument had been for so long. It's like, okay, I hear you. Not paying him fully guaranteed money, all that. I get it. What's the alternative? Are you really going to start over? Is Will Levis going to be your quarterback? So you really come back to it. And look, all the business stuff for now is in the rear view mirror. And now the focus becomes, how do you take the next step? Not just for Lamar Jackson, but the organization. They're more than a decade removed from winning the Super Bowl now. So how do you take the next step playing deep into January? And that's where you want the focus to be this time of year. I mean, you're not winning any Super Bowls at mandatory minicamp, but the focus, unlike last June, unlike last year's mandatory minicamp, where we hadn't seen Lamar Jackson all spring, and you're wondering where his head is, it very much is on the football field right now, and Todd Monken and the wide receivers. And I think there'll be some a greater amount of focus on some other individuals this week, quite frankly, other than Lamar Jackson, like Odell Beckham Jr. One, we expect him to be there, but two, how much is he going to do? Is he going to be a full participant, or do we just see him running around a little bit here and there? J.K. Dobbins, we've talked about him. Tyus Bowser hasn't been there all spring. Not that I think that there's necessarily anything wrong with him or disenchantment or anything like that, but Ronnie Stanley, first time we'll see Ronnie Stanley, presumably, I'm assuming this, taking part in a mini camp in a few years. So you do have some other individuals that the focus is going to be on. Look, the focus is always on Lamar. Let's be clear about that. That's been the case from the moment he took over in 2018. But the point is, his contract is no longer at the forefront, and you can now focus on more football-related matters, which a team that has Super Bowl aspirations like the Ravens, that's where you want the focus to be. You don't want to be talking about what's going on upstairs with the front office and business side. That's always there. That's always part of it. That's always in the background at the very least. But for this team, the focus truly is back on the football field. And I think that was refreshing, hearing a number of players asked about Lamar. Mark Andrews comes to mind right away. The number of times that guy has answered questions about Lamar Jackson, and specifically Lamar's future over the last couple of years, had to be refreshing for him as much as anyone in the organization.
Or Mark Andrews having to talk about Lamar's money, almost as bad as you and me talking about Lamar's money, right?
Yeah, exactly. Only in that case, I mean, that's his teammate, right? I mean, it's one thing, we're paid. It's part of our livelihood to talk about the business side and contracts and the salary cap, things of that nature.
Well, some people think it's my livelihood, others don't, but that's okay.
Sure. But when you're talking about teammates, that's a little more awkward. I mean, I think there were lots of players who empathized with Lamar, empathized with the Ravens, but at the same time, they didn't want to be in the middle of it. So I said it at the time of when they came to terms back on the day of the first night of the draft, that it really did feel like a cloud that had kind of been hanging over the organization for a while, just dissipating, right? Just disappeared. And doesn't mean that everything's perfect, but things just feel so much better for the organization, knowing that the contract's done. And now, oh yeah, go out there and try to win a championship now, Lamar and everyone else. So that's where the focus really is for this year's mandatory minicamp, which is a stark contrast of where we were a year ago at this time.
Well, I mean, this is the time of the year. I'm always amused, having done this from the time the Colts were here, being a fan of the offseason and drafts, to see how the league has done all this. But this is really a week where, Chad Steele's thrown me out and people like me out. So there's, real reporters are few and far between. They have their cameras everywhere. I have a feeling by the end of the week, Lamar Jackson's going to hit Odell Beckham on the tippy fingers and the tippy toes. And they're going to, I mean, this is going to be a week where Zay Flowers is going to cut somewhere and catch a sweet ball, and they're going to create a meme that has 2 million views. And that's what they do now. That's the business that they're in June, of creating that. But that's something we have not seen. It's something the fan base had. They're still trying to sell tickets and get you to go to London and get me to stay away from Cincinnati and Cleveland. Trying to get some people to go to the game, trying to get me to stay away. But the notion that this week, that this offensive fireworks, and you and I talked at length last week, Dennis and I talked at length last week about Todd Monken and the offense. This is a week where you get good optics, where everybody's signed. This time last year, it was that awful former reporter Nestor asking Lamar if he really wanted to be here. Now it's literally, this is a week for the organization to get people's hopes up. And as long as nobody turns an ankle, as long as there's no Leon Searcy, a mess this week there, they will create momentum for the season and give back slaps at the end of the week. And everybody should leave this feeling good. Everybody should put some good tape together for Ravens.com, right? And all the kumbayaing that Harbaugh is so good at, bringing people together. This is the week that all that happens. This is the organization will smell really good on Saturday, as long as the kid doesn't go out into a drug ditch and get himself killed next week. And that happened last year too.
Yeah, I mean, that's really, it's not just the Ravens, it's all 32 teams this time of year. I mean, even the worst teams in the league are selling more hope right now than they will come the fall. That's
Everybody's
for sure.
in the Vince McMahon business.
Exactly.
It's wild to watch how quickly they just all have taken the Vince McMahon model and said, we're going to bring that to Kansas City or wherever it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that's the nature of the business. At
It's
the end of the day,
entertainment.
exactly. It's entertainment. It is, and you're trying to sell fun, right? And you just said it, and it's not even turning an ankle. A player turns an ankle, that's not a big deal this time of year. But, and we've seen it around the league. We've seen some players suffer, a blown Achilles or a torn ACL. We've seen it with the Ravens in the past. I mean, Tavon Young tore his ACL way back when, back in the spring. Dennis Pitta, unfortunately, had his third and final hip injury that ended his career in the spring this time of year. So it can happen. So yeah, there's a downside to this time of year, and that's part of the whole discussion of spring workouts and voluntary versus mandatory and all of that. And
this is why we say to John, this is why we don't get them together doing this every week in March and April and May.
Exactly. And to be clear, look, guys get hurt working out on their own too. We can all remember Terrell Suggs getting hurt playing basketball in Arizona. Oh, wait, it was a conditioning drill, right? But no, I mean, that's part of it, unfortunately. But so much of this week, as you said, is really about selling hope. And for the Ravens, there's going to be a lot of excitement because we expect to see Odell Beckham out there at least doing some things. I don't think he's necessarily going to be full go. And we've seen the Ravens slow play some of their guys that, Rashad Bateman has been out there, but we haven't seen him do full team drills, for example. But he's looked good. He's on track. I mean, he's looked like Rashad Bateman pre-foot injury. So, yeah, that's what you're wanting from some of these veteran players coming back from injuries. And, it's exciting. It's going to be exciting to see Odell Beckham in his number 3 Ravens jersey. It's going to be exciting to see Ronnie Stanley out there taking part in minicamp for the first time since probably 2019. They didn't have minicamp in 20 because of the pandemic. So it's going to be a long time since seeing Ronnie Stanley out there this time of year. Now, is he going to be full go, or are they going to slow play him a little bit? I'm guessing they'll probably take care of him a little bit. So, you'll have that, but you just said it, for all these teams with their websites. And look, everyone's kind of in the business of, no one's really being disparaging of players this time of year. I mean, I say it all the time, and you'll see me. I'll have my 12 Ravens thoughts from Owings Mills throughout the week with observations. Observations are fun. Everyone wants to know what's happening out there, and that's fine, as long as we understand that anything that happens, good or bad, let's be clear, if someone drops a pass, that's not the end of the world either. But it's June, like you said, and we've seen plenty of players look really good playing in shorts, and then they get to training camp, let alone preseason or the regular season, and reality sets in a little bit. That introducing that threat of contact changes things. On the flip side, I can think of guys who this time of year did not stand out. I can think back to Mark Andrews, his very first training camp. He didn't look very good. We in fact, I kid you not, some of us, local, guys that are out there every single day, we were wondering if he was going to land on IR. We were wondering if he was going to be much of a factor as a rookie. And well, we saw what he looked like as a rookie when things mattered. He played really well. So you can never put too much stock into it, good or bad. But that having said that, it's fun, right? I mean, this is the time of year where we're talking about what this could look like come September, October, November, December. So, and we've talked about it. The Ravens still, I think, have a little bit of roster work to do. I'd still like to see a veteran edge rusher added to the mix between now and the start of the season. I still think that there's another veteran corner addition to be made. Whether it's Marcus Peters coming back or whether it's another veteran type that you're going to add to the mix just to fortify your depth. But those moves are doable. We're not talking about lucrative financial commitments there. They have the wherewithal. They have the ability to create the cap room to do that. So, but having said that, how the team looks right now, post-draft, post-free agency, all that, this is basically what we're going to see come September. So that's where it is exciting because it is mandatory this week. So you'll see some of those guys that we haven't seen running around over the last few weeks with OTAs. So it's your first real chance to lay eyes on the entire roster, or most 98% of it at the very least. And that's what makes it fun this week, as long as we understand that it is June at the end of the day and they're not doing anything for real just yet.
Luke Jones is here. He will be there in Owings Mills in the afternoon, as well as with the Birds. Neither one of them allow me in, so Luke has to work twice as much this week, but he will be doing that at Baltimore Luke and out at WNST, and of course out at Baltimore Positive as well, as the Orioles continue their torrid pace. The Ravens try to get above the fold, as we would say, right? Like they're trying to get some oxygen here. What are you looking for this week, other than what you're going to see, which are these tippy-toe catches and, the things that make memes and video snippets good? The Odell Beckham thing to me is the straw that stirs the drink, in a good way, a bad way. They're all about it. Monken knows him. He's a champion. He's all that. He wasn't that in Cleveland. He certainly wasn't that with the Giants. Go ask Eli Manning. Go ask the Giants people. Now, we all mature, we all move around. He's got a ring. He's at this point a mercenary, right? Like he's not going to be on this team next year unless he stinks and plays cheap. And if he stinks, they're not going to want him back. This is a fascinating rental of him, and I don't know whether if I have any comparison, right? Like you would say, well, he could be the Anquan Bolden of the Super Bowl back shoulder third down catch in Las Vegas and have a parade here. And he could also be Shannon Sharp, right? Like Shannon Sharp came in here at a very volatile time back when I was still a real media member and wrote books about such things. Really was a stabilizing force with Ray and the law and the media and a bad offense, like all of that. Shannon Sharp's got his own problems finding new partners in media here all these years later. But when I think of the leadership history of the organization, and I don't mean John Ogden, Ray Lewis, Suggs, Reed, I'm talking imported guys where they are going to transplant heart into the team. They've done that with the defense with Roquan Smith. Clearly, they didn't feel like Marlon Humphrey's the leader over there, or that Patrick Queen was going to be able to play that position the next 5 years at that level. They love C.J. Mosley and got priced out of him. But bringing in guys from other organizations, Eric's had a lifetime in doing this and trying to identify the right guys. And he's got a really mixed card on that, because every Jeremy Maclin and every, all of those, he owns that stuff too. He owns Earl Thomas as well, which was a disaster for everybody. So I don't know, but this Odell Beckham thing, they feel like they've served this up. It felt like a little bit of a tic-tac for Lamar, like, try to get Lamar back or whatever. Now they have to go sleep with it, and they have to go make it work. And there's one football for all of them. And we've talked about that at length for Monken and the genius of but the Odell Beckham thing, as much as I feel like I know what I'm going to get out of Lamar. I mean, I've seen Lamar around here. I don't know what we're going to get out of Beckham and whether that's going to make Lamar better or not. Because that's really what they're betting on. They're betting on Odell Beckham is going to make Lamar Jackson better as a human, as a player, as a celebrity, as like all of that. That's what they've imported in the way that when Shannon Sharp came in here and Rod Woodson came in here, brought freaking grown-ups in here, like big boy pants. Super Bowl 35 team. I know I was on the inside of that. I don't know. I've watched Odell Beckham from the outside. He don't smell like Shannon Sharp to me.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be fascinating. And look, I mean, Shannon Sharp when he came in at that point, I mean that was a Ravens team that was, and we can talk about this team needing to learn how to play deep into January, but they've had no problems winning games in the regular season. Whereas the pre 2000 Ravens, I mean, the best they could say was they had gone 8-8, the year before. So it's not quite that dynamic. But your point is well taken. And look, it's not just Lamar Jackson. I want to see how Odell Beckham influences Rashad Bateman, how he influences Zay Flowers. I mean, you have two in the case of Flowers, a first round rookie this year. Bateman, a couple years removed from being a first round pick. What's the influence look like there? So it's going to be fascinating. Look, I mean, there's so much to look at with Beckham and either be a proponent of it and say, look, he sat out all of last year after having a second ACL surgery in a 2-year period. And he didn't force his way back onto the field last year. He wasn't playing as a diminished version of himself. This idea that he could really truly heal up. He's only 30 years old. I mean, we're not talking about someone who's 36, in the case of when the Ravens brought in Deshaun Jackson last year. So there's a lot about him. Even some of what you said as far as what his rap might have been with the Giants or Cleveland, the Rams loved him. He was absolutely a net positive contributor for them. I mean, go look at what his postseason numbers were. He was really good for them in January, and he was possibly going to be MVP of the Super Bowl before he hurts his knee late in the second quarter. So he was a positive there, but that was a smaller sample size, and that was a couple years ago. And as much as he's been through physically, that's where you look on the flip side and say, all right, he's 30, but he's also 30 with this injury history. So is he actually someone that plays older than that? So I think, look, he'll have a one-handed catch at some point, even if he's just goofing around, and they'll make a highlight out of it, and that'll be fun, right? I mean, nothing wrong with that. Let's be clear. But how's he running? How's he moving around? How involved is he? Like I said, I don't think he's necessarily going to be a full go, but I think he'll do something. I think we'll see him running around at least during individual and some things like that. I don't know that for sure, but that's my expectation. But yeah, I think there's plenty of intrigue to see how this is going to go. And in the case of Beckham, perhaps it's alleviated a little bit by the reality that the Ravens paid him 15 million guaranteed as opposed to the 7 that people thought he'd get from whether it's the Ravens or the Jets or whoever was going to sign him. So he has a little more financial. He doesn't need security, but you understand what I'm saying from that standpoint. But he is on a 1-year deal. It is a standpoint where the guy's very clearly trying to reestablish his career, whether he sees that long term with the Ravens or not. He's clearly trying to get himself reestablished.
But he needs the ball this year in order to do that. They all do. J.K. Dobbins needs the ball too.
And that's what's going to be fascinating about this because, as we've mentioned, do I think the Ravens are going to throw the ball more than they have in the past? Yes, of course I do. They wouldn't have added at wide receiver to the degree that they have if they weren't planning to do that. However, do I think that means they're going to throw it 45 times a game? No, I don't, because Todd Monken's history recently at Georgia was they ran the heck out of the football and they threw to their tight ends. I don't think that's completely disappearing from the Ravens offense. So this is all part of the balance of not so much keeping everyone happy, although at the end of the day, that's kind of what it is. But if you're Todd Monken, it's having balance. It's utilizing all the talent you have all over the field. It's run and pass. It's play action. It's RPO. It's spreading teams out more than Greg Roman did in running against lighter boxes. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. And yeah, you look at the players you have to keep happy, and we can get to J.K. Dobbins here in a moment, but Odell Beckham, his history suggests he's going to want the football. And by the way, I understand that from top wide receivers. Jerry Rice wanted the football, right? Chris Carter wanted the football. I mean, that's that's how it goes, right? I mean, that's just as much as you can love guys like Kadri Ismail, for example. God bless him, and I love Q. The 2000 Ravens, he was their number one wide receiver. He didn't need the ball a whole lot because he wasn't Jerry Rice. He wasn't Terrell Owens. We've seen that. We saw that with Willie Snead a couple years ago. Kind of their, maybe not their number one, but you get it, a starting wide receiver who wasn't going to get the ball very much. So it is going to be a different dynamic, and we're not going to get any answer for that this week, but we'll start to see what this all could look like. It gets the imagination going. It gets the juices flowing in terms of really picturing what this could look like come September and playing deeper into the season. So it's fun in that regard. But I think for just this week, though, what you tangibly want to see is how well is Beckham moving around? How fast does he look? How does this change of direction look? Is he favoring the knee in any way? And I'm not necessarily the guy that's going to be able to tell you that perfectly, but there'll be enough video, and the Dr. David Chow's of the Twitter universe will look at him and say, hey, he's running really well. This looks a lot different than the Odell Beckham we saw in 2021 with the Rams, who still had a little bit of a hitch in his giddy up. So we'll see how it plays out in that regard, but certainly with Beckham, laying eyes on him for the first time since, I guess, seeing him at Preakness, right? Yeah, that's kind of the first time we saw him, at least in Baltimore, let's say. So we'll see how it looks, but it's going to be fascinating because I think it's easy for Ravens fans to think about the best case scenario, but we also know that hey, there was a time when Ravens fans were excited about getting Jeremy Maclin and guys and Michael Crabtree and guys of that
And
nature.
Earl Thomas.
And then a few months later, you say, "Oh, that didn't work out too well." So we'll see what happens here with Beckham, but certainly it's a higher a price, a higher cost, a higher higher cost of doing business, and expectations are going to be very high all the way around as far as how that's going to work out.
Keep him healthy out in Owings Mills this week. Luke Jones will be on appointment, on double assignment this week. Greg Bader and Chad Steele working Luke like a dog, or maybe I am. Maybe he actually works for me. He'll be in Owings Mills. He'll be at Camden Yards all week long. I will be available, Nest at BaltimorePositive.com. We're taking the Maryland Crab Cake Tour on the road beginning next week. Spirits West next Thursday. We're going to be moving to Shannon's. We're going to be at Pappas and Glen Burnie. We're going to be at Costas to start our 26th year. That's on August the 3rd, celebrating 25 years at WNST, as well as August 4th at Drug City. I'm going to drag all my friends and sponsors to Dundalk to kick off our 25th year, just to show them the homeland, get them some good crabs. All brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. We'll be giving these away all summer long. The Maryland Crab Cake Tour schedule now up on the web as well. Brought to you by our friends at Window Nation, 866-90Nation. Look out for Luke. Get him a towel and some hydration and some hot dogs this week. It's Orioles and Ravens at least for one more week. Then we go into baseball season. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.